The table is silent, the balls are racked, and somewhere in the world, a man is lining up a shot that will either cement his legacy or end it. 8-ball pool looks simple. Knock your balls in, sink the black, done. But that's not what this video is about. This is about the men who turned that simple game into something that looked like sorcery. Men who traveled from the Philippines, from Germany, from Finland, from Scotland, and walked into rooms full of the best players alive and made them feel completely ordinary. This is about dynasties, about power, about who had it, who took it, and who got left behind, wondering what went wrong. Over the next 33 minutes, we're going through every player who ever truly owned this sport. Not just the ones who won tournaments, but the ones who changed what winning even looked like. Some of them ruled for a decade. Some ruled for a single, unforgettable moment. And some are still ruling right now, and they're not done yet. The question isn't who was the greatest. The question is, how did power keep moving? How did one dynasty fall and another rise? And is there anyone left who can stop what's coming next? This is Every 8-Ball Dynasty Explained. Before we get into the players, we need to talk about the game itself, because 8-ball pool isn't just a game, it's a battlefield with a specific kind of cruelty built into it. Unlike 9-ball, where one lucky break can win you a rack, 8-ball demands total control. You need to clear your entire group, solids or stripes, without handing your opponent a single opening. One mistake, one bad leave, one moment of arrogance at the table, and the whole rack flips against you. That's why dynasties in 8-ball are so rare and so respected. The men in this video didn't just get lucky. They mastered a game that punishes imperfection at every single turn. They developed styles, weapons, and mental frameworks that other professionals spent years trying to decode and mostly fail. And here's the thing that makes this story so fascinating. Every time one man figured out how to dominate this sport, someone else from a completely different corner of the world figured out how to dismantle everything he'd built. The Philippines produced magicians, Europe produced machines, America produced warriors, and the newest generation, they produced something nobody had a name for yet. This is how it all started, and like every great dynasty story, it starts with one man that everyone else measured themselves against. Efren Reyes, the god who started it all. There is a moment in competitive pool where a player sees a shot and every other professional in the room quietly accepts that they would never have even attempted it. Efren Reyes lived in that moment permanently. Born in the Philippines, Reyes didn't come up through academies or coaching programs. He learned the game in billiard halls, hustling for money before most kids his age had any idea what a cue even was. And somewhere in those halls, he developed something that couldn't be taught, an instinctive, almost supernatural ability to read a table that made every shot look pre-planned 3 moves ahead. They didn't call him the magician as a compliment. They called him that because professionals genuinely couldn't explain what they were watching. His cue ball control was so precise, so quietly devastating, that opponents would lose racks without fully understanding how it happened. He didn't overpower the table, he manipulated it, like the balls were moving exactly where he'd already decided they'd go before he even bent down. In 8-ball specifically, where position play is everything, Reyes was operating on a completely different level. He set the blueprint for what Filipino pool excellence would come to mean. Technical mastery wrapped in total composure. Every dynasty that came after him was, in some way, chasing his shadow. But while Efren made the game look like poetry, the next man made it look like a war zone, and somehow kept winning anyway. Earl Strickland, the volcano that won anyway. If Efren Reyes was poetry, Earl Strickland was a 5-alarmed fire, and somehow, impossibly, the fire kept winning. Earl Strickland is one of the most talented pool players to ever pick up a cue. That part is not debatable. What is debatable is how he managed to win as much as he did while simultaneously being his own worst enemy at the table. Because Earl Strickland didn't just compete against his opponents, He competed against himself, against the crowd, against the referee, against the lighting in the room, against anyone and anything that existed within a 50-foot radius of the table. He was notorious for his outbursts, the trash talk, the emotional explosions mid-match that made spectators genuinely uncomfortable. There were moments in major tournaments where it looked like Earl was going to self-destruct completely, and then he'd run out the table with a precision that left everyone speechless. That was the paradox of Earl Strickland. The rage wasn't separate from the talent. For Earl, the emotion seemed to fuel something, like the pressure he created for himself. The drama, the chaos, sharpened him in ways that calm couldn't. He became a 3-time World Pool Masters champion. He represented America on the Mosconi Cup stage repeatedly, and he did it all while being the most combustible personality the sport had ever seen. But while Earl was lighting rooms on fire, one man was sitting in the corner, completely silent, completely deadly. Johnny Archer, the quiet assassin. There's a certain kind of dangerous that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't trash talk. It doesn't pace around the table. It just sits down, picks up a cue, and quietly takes everything from you before you even realize what's happening. That was Johnny Archer. Where Earl Strickland was a storm you could see coming from miles away, Archer was the kind of threat you only noticed after it was already too late. He carried himself with a stillness at the table that was almost unsettling. No theatrics, no emotion, just a methodical, suffocating brand of pool that wore opponents down rack by rack until there was nothing left to compete with. Archer earned the nickname the Scorpion, and it fit perfectly. Scorpions don't chase, they wait, they position, and when the moment arrives, the strike is so fast and so precise that the opponent barely registers what happened. His dynasty was built on consistency in an era when consistency was the rarest commodity in professional pool. While other elite players had peaks and valleys, Archer maintained a level of performance that made him a permanent threat at every major event he entered. He was a 2-time WPA World 8-Ball Champion, a title that requires not just talent, but the kind of mental endurance that very few players in history have ever truly possessed. He proved it in 8-Ball. The quietest player in the room is often the most dangerous one. But the next man didn't just come quietly. He came from the same country as Efren Reyes, and that alone should have been warning enough. Francisco Bustamante, the other Filipino ghost. If you thought the Philippines only had one legend, you weren't paying attention, because while Efren Reyes was being called the Magician, another Filipino was quietly building a career just as devastating, just with a cigarette in his mouth and a nickname borrowed from a spaghetti western. Francisco Django Bustamante got that nickname as a teenager because his scrappy, fearless attitude at the table reminded people of a gunslinger who never backed down, and that character fit him perfectly, because Bustamante's dynasty was built entirely on fearlessness. He adapted his game from the full rack rotation he grew up on in the Philippines to 8-ball, 9-ball, and straight pool when he moved to Europe. And instead of struggling with the transition, he mastered all three. That adaptability became his superpower. While other elite players were specialists, Bustamante was a complete weapon across every format. But the moment that truly defined his character came in 2002. While competing at the World Pool Championship, he received a phone call from his wife, informing him that his infant daughter had passed away. Devastated, he almost forfeited, but pushed on, winning 18 consecutive matches in the tournament, a feat that may never be equaled. He didn't win the title that year, but he proved something more important than a trophy. He proved that his mind was unbreakable. He was later inducted into the Billiard Congress of America Hall of Fame, becoming only the second Filipino ever inducted, following Efren Reyes. But while the Philippines kept producing legends, Europe had been watching closely and building something cold, calculated, and extremely dangerous. Rolf Souquet, the German machine. While the Philippines was producing magicians and America was producing warriors, Germany was running a completely different program, one built not on instinct or emotion, but on engineering. And the product of that program had a nickname that told you everything you needed to know: the Kaiser. Rolf Souquet began playing billiards at the age of 6 in his parents' pub, practicing up to 5 hours per day. He won his first German championship title at the age of 14. That level of structured, relentless repetition didn't produce a player, it produced a system, a walking, breathing pool algorithm that processed tables with terrifying efficiency. What made Souquet's dynasty so remarkable wasn't just the titles, it was the longevity. He accumulated over 100 career titles, including a record 6 World Pool Masters victories, the 1996 WPA World 9-Ball Championship, and the 2008 WPA World 8-Ball Championship, winning across multiple decades against completely different generations of competition is something almost no player in history has managed. And then there's the practice story that the pool world still talks about. When preparing for a major event, Souquet ran 27 consecutive break-and runs in 8-ball during a practice session, stopping only because he missed position by half a ball on the 28th rack. 27 in a row. That's not talent, that's a machine. But even machines have rivals. And the next European threat came from somewhere nobody expected, Finland. Mika Immonen, the Finnish phenomenon. Finland is not a country you associate with pool. It's a country of long winters, ice hockey, and silence. But sometimes silence is exactly what produces the most dangerous competitor in the room. Mika Immonen carried a nickname that suited him perfectly, the Iceman. Not because he was cold as a person, but because under pressure, when the match was on the line and the crowd was holding its breath, his demeanor never changed, not even slightly. That kind of psychological stillness at the highest level isn't common. It's almost supernatural. He won his first world title in 2001 at the WPA World 9-Ball Championship in Cardiff, defeating Rolf Souquet in the final, the very same German machine we just talked about. Think about that. He walked into the biggest match of his life and dismantled the most disciplined player in Europe without flinching. He added a second world title in 10-ball in 2009 and captured back-to-back US Open 9-ball championships in 2008 and 2009. Billiards Digest later named him its Player of the Decade for the 2000s. An entire decade owned. But what makes Immonen's story truly powerful is how it ended. In December 2023, he disclosed a stage 4 colorectal cancer diagnosis. Even as he navigated treatments, he continued to play in tournaments whenever possible. He fought the disease the same way he fought opponents, without showing a single crack. He passed away on September 28, 2025, at the age of 52. The Iceman never melted. He simply left the table. But while Europe was producing legends, one man from the Philippines who'd quietly moved to Canada was about to have the greatest single tournament run anyone had ever seen. Alex Pagulayan, the lion who roared once and never stopped. Some players are technically perfect. Some are mentally unbreakable. Alex Pagulayan was something rarer. He was genuinely, impossibly fun to watch. And underneath that crowd-pleasing personality was a competitor who simply refused to accept that a match was over. They called him the Lion, not just because his name sounds like it, but because of what he did when his back was against the wall. The Lion doesn't panic when cornered, it attacks. He first gained global prominence as a finalist in the 2003 World Pool Championship, before capturing the 2004 WPA World 9-Ball Championship in Taipei, Taiwan, defeating Pei Wei Chang 17-13 in the final. That title alone would have been enough for most players, but Pagulayan's real dynasty wasn't built on one world title. It was built on a style of competition that made him dangerous in every single format he touched. He accomplished something no other pool player in history had done: win all 3 main event tournaments at the Derby City Classic. 9-ball, 1-pocket, banks, all 3. That's not specialization. That's domination across the entire sport. And then there was the comeback story against Shane Van Boening, a race to 100 in 10-ball, where Pagulayan found himself down by more than 20 racks, clawed all the way back, and won. Pool fans called it one of the best comeback wins in pool history. The Lion didn't just roar once. He kept roaring long after everyone expected him to go quiet. But while Pagulayan was thrilling crowds with comebacks, one American was building something far more methodical, something that would redefine what U.S. dominance even looked like. Shane Van Boening, the American Dynasty. There is a version of this story where Shane Van Boening never becomes the greatest American pool player of his generation, where the kid from Rapid City, South Dakota, born deaf, bullied at school, retreating to his grandfather's pool hall just to escape, never figures out how to translate all that pain into something extraordinary. But that's not the story that happened. What happened instead is that Shane Van Boening turned his hearing loss into a weapon. When asked about his deafness in a 60 Minutes interview, Van Boening said, "It's actually a big advantage for me. When I play a pool tournament, I can just shut it off, total silence. I'm totally like 100% zoned in. Crowd disappears. The pressure disappears. There's nothing left but the table. And on the table, he is simply better than almost everyone alive." Van Boening has won virtually every significant title in the game, including the World 9-Ball Championship, the World 8-Ball Championship, and 5 U.S. Open 9-ball titles. He holds the record for the most Mosconi Cup appearances, with 19 consecutive selections for Team USA from 2007 to 2025. An entire generation of American pool defined by one name. In 2020, he was named Player of the Decade for the 2010s by Billiards Digest magazine. An entire decade owned. Again, he is still competing at the highest level right now, still collecting titles, still showing up, still dangerous. But America's grip on the throne was about to get challenged, and once again, the challenge came from the Philippines. Dennis Orcolo, the comeback king. There are pool players who grew up around the game. And then there is Dennis Orcolo, who grew up with nothing, learned pool on his grandfather's table in a fishing village, dropped out of school at 9 years old, and turned himself into one of the most feared competitors the sport has ever produced. His father was a fisherman who lost his life in a typhoon boating accident when Dennis was just 5 years old. At 9, he dropped out of school due to financial problems and began hustling pool, routinely beating grown men for 20 pesos a game. At 16, he left home for a gold mining town to hustle pool, and within days, nobody would play him anymore. So he moved to Manila with almost nothing and started over. That story alone should tell you everything about the kind of competitor Dennis Orcolo is. He doesn't know how to quit. He doesn't recognize the concept of being outmatched. They called him RoboCop because his execution at the table was so precise, so emotionless, so mechanically perfect under pressure that he barely seemed human. He won the 2011 WPA World 8-Ball Championship, beating Niels Feijen 10-3 in the final, and was named WPA Player of the Year that same season. But the moment that truly cemented his legend wasn't a world title. In 2020, Orcolo defeated Shane Van Boening 120-119 in a grueling 3-day money match to be officially crowned the Money Game King. The greatest American player of his generation, beaten over 3 days by a man from a fishing village who never finished 3rd grade. Since 2022, a U.S. re-entry ban has kept him off American soil, but RoboCop keeps competing wherever he can. The machine doesn't stop. But while the Philippines kept delivering warriors, Europe was quietly loading its next weapon. And this one came from the Netherlands, with a nickname that said everything. Niels Feijen, the Dutchman's throne. Europe had already given us the Kaiser and the Iceman, but the Netherlands was about to introduce the most intimidating nickname in the entire sport, a name that didn't just describe a playing style, it issued a warning: the Terminator. Niels Feijen discovered pool at 16 in his hometown of The Hague. At 20, he traveled to the United States to train and compete against the stars he'd only ever watched on video. That trip rewired something in him. He came back to the Netherlands a different kind of player, one who had tasted the highest level of the game and decided he belonged there permanently. What made Feijen genuinely terrifying wasn't just his shot-making, it was his consistency. His relentless, suffocating consistency. Over a career spanning more than 2 decades, he showed up at the biggest events in the world and kept performing. His biggest years were 2013 and 2014, a 2-year stretch where he won the World Pool Masters, the WPA World 9-Ball Championship, back-to-back World Cup of Pool runner-up finishes, and back-to-back Mosconi Cup MVP honors. That's not a hot streak, that's a siege. In 2023, he became the first Dutch-born player ever inducted into the Billiard Congress of America Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to a career that refused to peak and then disappear. As recently as April 2025, Feijen captured the Super Billiards Expo title, defeating Eklund Kachi in the final to return to the winner's circle at age 48. The Terminator keeps terminating. But Europe wasn't the only continent building a new dynasty. Asia had been watching quietly, and Taiwan was about to send a message that nobody in the pool world was ready for. Ko Pin Yi, Taiwan's silent takeover. Nobody handed Taiwan a seat at the table. They just quietly showed up one day and started winning everything. Ko Pin Yi didn't arrive with a flashy nickname or a dramatic backstory. He arrived with something more dangerous, a level of composure and technical precision that made the game look almost unfairly simple. His nickname, the Prince of Pool, wasn't given sarcastically. It was given with complete sincerity by a sport that recognized it was watching royalty. But nothing in his career prepared the pool world for what happened in 2015. In one remarkable calendar year, Ko won the World 9-Ball Championship, the World 10-Ball Championship, and the World Cup of Pool, a golden treble that established him as one of the game's true greats. 3 world titles, 1 calendar year. It had never been done before at that level. The sport didn't just take notice, it stood up and stared. What made it even more extraordinary was the human story behind it. Ko later reflected that what he remembered most from that run wasn't the trophies, but his brothers being with him at every tournament, giving him peace of mind to compete freely. A dynasty built not just on talent, but on family. He hasn't stopped. In 2023, Ko became the first Taiwanese player ever to win the World Pool Masters title, and in early 2026, he kicked off the season by winning the Chinese Taipei Open on the World 9-Ball Tour. But Taiwan wasn't done with just one Ko, because his brother had his own throne to claim. Ko Ping Chong, the other Ko. Imagine being one of the best pool players in the world and still being introduced as someone's younger brother. That was Ko Ping Chung's reality for years. His older brother, Ko Pin Yi, had already won 3 world titles and become a Taiwanese icon. The shadow was long and deep, and for a lesser competitor, it might have been suffocating. But Ko Ping Chung didn't shrink under that shadow. He used it as fuel. Their father owned an 8-table pool hall in Yilan County, Taiwan, immersing all 3 Ko brothers in the sport from an early age and creating what can only be described as a pool dynasty within a single family. While Pin Yi blazed the trail, Ping Chung studied everything his brother did and quietly developed his own identity at the table. Precise, explosive, fearless against the biggest names in the sport. His nickname, the King Killer, wasn't given lightly. In the 2023 US Open final, he overcame Russia's Fedor Gorst 13-6, including a streak of 10 consecutive racks after leveling the score following an 11-0 semifinal demolition of Singapore's Aloysius Yap. That's not just winning, that's sending a message. And then, in 2025, he delivered the biggest statement of his career. Ko Ping-chung went through the entire 2025 WPA World 10-Ball Championship undefeated, defeating Alexander Kazakis 3-1 in the final to claim his second world title, becoming a two-time world champion entirely on his own terms, entirely out of his brother's shadow. Taiwan didn't produce one dynasty, it produced a family of, but the Philippines still had one more card to play, and it was one nobody saw coming. Carlo Beato, the Philippines' last card. Every dynasty needs a closer, someone who shows up when the stakes are highest, when the pressure is suffocating, when everyone expects them to fold, and instead just wins. Carlo Beato is that person for the Philippines. He didn't burst onto the scene with teenage headlines or prodigy stories. He started playing pool at 13, worked as a caddy in a golf course, dropped out of high school, and spent years grinding through the lower levels of the sport before winning his first professional title in 2010. Nobody handed Beato anything. He earned every single inch. Unlike his flashier countrymen, most of whom enjoyed great international success almost immediately, Beato toiled for nearly a decade before tasting real victory. That patience, that stubborn, grinding patience, is exactly what makes him so dangerous, because when he finally arrived, he arrived completely. Beato became the first ever Filipino player to win the World 9-Ball Championship twice, in 2017 and 2025, and also claimed the World 10-Ball Championship in 2024. 3 world titles, all built on composure, precision, and an iron refusal to be rattled. The 2025 World Championship final told the whole story. He built a commanding 9-2 lead against world number 1 Fedor Gorst, watched Gorst reel off 7 straight racks to level at 9-9, stayed calm through 2 more ties, and ultimately sealed a 15-13 victory with clinical precision in the final rack. In November 2025, he was elected to the Billiard Congress of America Hall of Fame, the 6th Filipino ever inducted, standing alongside the very legends who inspired him. But now we need to talk about the man Beato had to dethrone to reclaim his crown, a man from an unlikely background who had quietly taken over the sport entirely. Billy Thorpe, the grinder nobody talks about enough. There's a specific type of player the pool world has always produced but rarely celebrates loudly enough. The guy who doesn't have the flashiest story, the most dramatic nationality narrative, or the most viral moments. The guy who just shows up and quietly beats people who probably should beat him. Billy Thorpe is that guy. He grew up in Inglewood, Ohio, in a pool family. His dad sawed down a cue for him when he was 2 or 3 years old, set balls right up near the pockets, and watched his toddler son start knocking them in one by one. By the time other kids his age were figuring out what sport they liked, Thorpe already had thousands of hours at the table. Pool wasn't a hobby, it was the air he breathed. His specialty, the thing that separates him from almost every other player on this list, is bank pool. Many in the pool world consider him the best bank pool player alive right now, with a particular mastery of 3-rail bank shots that professionals simply cannot replicate consistently. That skill earned him his nickname, Billy the Banker, and it built a career defined not by highlight reel moments, but by cold, systematic excellence. He won his first World 9-Ball Tour title at the 2023 McDermott Classic, and added a second at the 2024 Battle of the Bull. He has been a multiple Mosconi Cup champion representing Team USA. He has consistently ranked inside the top 25 on the AZ Billiards money leaderboard year after year. No drama, no controversy, just results. The grinder's dynasty is quiet by design, but the wins are real. But while Thorpe was grinding in America's shadow, another American was trying to make a lot more noise. and nearly pulling it off. America fights back. If Shane Van Boening is America's foundation and professional pool, the bedrock that everything else is built on, then Skylar Woodward is the spark, the energy, the guy who walks into an arena full of hostile European fans, turns his walk-on music up, and somehow plays better because of the noise around him. From Paducah, Kentucky, a place that has produced exactly 0 things the pool world expected, Woodward arrived on the international scene younger than anyone anticipated. When he joined Team USA at the 2015 Mosconi Cup, he became the youngest American ever to compete at the event, at just 22 years and 7 months old. Nobody knew who he was. Europe certainly wasn't worried. They should have been. Woodward won back-to-back Mosconi Cup MVP awards in 2018 and 2019, leading Team USA to consecutive titles and establishing himself as the most clutch performer in American pool's most pressure-filled team event. The Mosconi Cup isn't like a regular tournament. It's pool's version of the Ryder Cup. Packed arenas, nationalistic noise, everything on the line. And Woodward feasted on it. His nickname, the Bluegrass Badass, perfectly captures the contradiction at the heart of his game. A small-town Kentucky kid who plays with the kind of fearless aggression that belongs on the biggest stages in the world. By 2024, his peers and teammates trusted him so completely that he was named playing captain of Team USA at the Mosconi Cup, a role he retained for 2025. He hasn't claimed a world title yet, but in a team setting, under maximum pressure, Woodward has repeatedly been America's most important player. But individual pressure is a completely different beast, and the next player on this list thrives under exactly that kind of darkness. He came from Albania, and nobody saw him coming at all. Eklund Kaci, Albania's dark horse. Pool has been dominated by the Philippines, the United States, Taiwan, Germany, the Netherlands. These are the countries you expect to produce world champions. Albania is not on that list. Albania has never been on that list until Eklund Kaci decided it should be. Born in Lach, Albania in 1999, Kaci started playing pool at 8 years old in local halls, and by age 18, had already won the Aramith Masters and reached world number 1 in the WPA rankings. Read that again. World number 1 at 18. From Albania, the pool world had genuinely never seen anything like it. Standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a calmness at the table that borders on eerie, Kaci earned the nickname the Golden Eagle, a player who surveys the table from a height most opponents simply don't have, executing shots with a composure that makes pressure matches look routine. His motto, famously, is just 3 words: never give up. He won the WPA World 10-Ball Championship in both 2021 and 2023, making him a 2-time world champion before his mid-20s, and then in 2024, he came agonizingly close to a 3rd world title. In the World 9-Ball Championship final in Saudi Arabia, Kaci tied the score at 13-13 against Fedor Gorst, with a breathtaking 2-rail combination shot that commentators called the shot of the tournament, only to lose on a dry break in the final rack, 15-14. 1 rack, that's all that separated him from a dynasty-defining 3rd world title. He also made history as the first ever European player to qualify for the inaugural Reyes Cup. Albania's Golden Eagle keeps climbing, but the man who beat him in that 2024 final, the man who has built the most dominant single season in modern pool history, is next, and his story is unlike anything this sport has ever produced. Fedor Gorst, the Russian ice wall. Born in Moscow in 2000, raised on a game with pockets so small, most Western players have never even seen one. Relocated to southern Indiana at age 22 with no guarantee of anything, and then, in the span of about 2 years, became the most dominant pool player on the planet. The story of Fedor Gorst is genuinely one of the strangest and most compelling in the history of professional sports. Not just pool, sports. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Gorst was suspended from major competitions alongside other Russian athletes. That moment accelerated a decision he had already been considering. He moved to the United States, settled in southern Indiana, and began competing under a neutral flag while rebuilding his life from scratch. The American pool community, to their enormous credit, welcomed him completely, and he repaid that welcome by becoming the best player in the world. In 2024, Gorst accomplished something unprecedented in professional pool. He became the first player ever to win the World Pool Masters, the World Pool Championship, and the US Open, all in the same calendar year. The pool world immediately named it the Gorst Slam. No one had ever done it. No one had even come close. He became the longest reigning world #1 in World 9-Ball Tour history and the youngest player ever to win multiple World Pool Championship titles. His coach described him as a teenager not interested in finishing drills quickly, but deeply interested in understanding the idea behind them. That mental stability, that coolness, was the thing that stood out from day one. The Gorst Slam may never be repeated, but if anyone can do it, the next player on this list has already come closer than most people realize. Jason Shaw, Scotland's wrecking ball. There's a story Jason Shaw tells about his early days in the sport. As a teenager in Glasgow, he worked at a snooker hall, cleaning tables, refilling fridges, doing the grunt work that nobody else wanted. One of the tables he cleaned belonged to John Higgins, one of the greatest snooker players who ever lived. Today, Shaw holds world records that make Higgins look up and take notice. Born in Glasgow, Scotland, Shaw was introduced to pool at age 4 by his father, himself a professional player. By 8, he was already competing on the Scottish team and winning junior tournaments. From day one, the talent was unmistakable. But what transformed talent into a dynasty was something raw and harder to teach: an absolutely ferocious competitive drive that turns every match into a personal mission. Shaw's nickname is Eagle Eye, but watching him compete, you'd call him something less polite. He attacks the table like he has a personal grudge against it. Fast, aggressive, relentless, a playing style that doesn't just beat opponents, it demoralizes them. He made history in 2024 by becoming the first ever player captain to win the Mosconi Cup MVP award, leading Team Europe to victory in one of pool's most pressure-filled team events. He then led Team Europe to a dominant 11-3 victory over Team USA in the 2025 Mosconi Cup, one of the most lopsided results in the event's recent history. And then there's the record that lives completely outside tournament pool. On January 6, 2025, Shaw set the world record for 14.1 straight pool with an astonishing 832 consecutive balls, breaking his own previous record in a live-streamed session that left the entire pool world speechless. 832 balls, straight pool, without stopping. Scotland's wrecking ball doesn't just break opponents, he breaks records. But if Shaw is the storm, the next player is the architect, a man who builds victories with such precision that watching him play feels like watching someone solve a puzzle the rest of the world can't even see. Albin Auschen, the Austrian architect. While others in this sport built their dynasties on power, aggression, or shock and awe talent, Albin Auschen built his on something quieter and infinitely more durable: precision, structure, and architectural understanding of the table that makes his game look less like competition and more like controlled demolition. They call him the smooth operator. Watch him play once and you'll understand why immediately. Growing up in Klagenfurt, Austria, Auschen's parents owned a pool hall, and his father was a professional player himself. Albin literally learned the game by standing on a box to reach the table as a child. That head start translated into something remarkable. At just 11 years old, he became the youngest European pool champion in history, a record he still holds today. But it was on the world stage where his dynasty truly took shape. He claimed his first WPA World 9-Ball Championship in 2016, defeating Shane van Beuning 13-6 in the final, becoming Austria's first ever World 9-ball champion. Then he came back and did it again. He won a second world title in 2021, one of only a handful of players in history to win the World Pool Championship twice. And in October 2025, Austria's smooth operator added a third dimension to his legend. He captured the 2025 WPA Men's 8-Ball World Championship in Bali, Indonesia, defeating world number 1 Alex Kazakis in a commanding final performance, becoming a 3-time world champion across different disciplines: 9-ball, 9-ball, 8-ball. 3 world titles, 1 architect. Nobody has won more trophies on the World 9-Ball Tour than Albin Auschen. That sentence alone should end any debate about where he stands in the modern era. But the sport's youngest dynasty belongs to someone else, a German who arrived without warning, dismantled every record in sight, and turned professional pool upside down before most players his age had even found their footing. Joshua Filler, the youngest dynasty ever built. Every generation of pool has had its prodigy. It's too young to be this good story that makes veterans shake their heads and fans lean forward in their seats. But Joshua Filler didn't just arrive as a prodigy. He arrived as something the sport had never fully processed before. A teenager who walked into rooms full of the greatest players alive and systematically dismantled them with a composure that shouldn't exist in someone that young. Born in Germany in 1997, Filler started playing pool at 7 years old. His defining breakthrough came at the 2017 China Open, when he became its youngest ever champion, a teenager beating seasoned professionals on a major international stage. The pool world took notice. Then it took cover, because what followed was not a gradual rise, it was an avalanche. In 2018, Filler defeated Carlo Beato 13-10 to win the WPA World 9-Ball Championship, becoming one of the youngest world champions the sport had ever seen at 20 years old. Then he kept going. In 2019, he captured the US Open 9-ball title and rose to world number 1 in both WPA and Euro Tour rankings simultaneously. Then in 2022, he won the World Pool Masters and the UK Open. Then in 2024, he added the WPA World 8-Ball Championship in New Zealand. 2 world championships across 2 different disciplines, multiple major titles, world number 1 rankings, multiple Mosconi Cup MVP awards, all before turning 30. He opened 2025 by winning the European Open with a stunning 13-1 demolition of Naoyuki Oh in the final, a scoreline that barely qualifies as a contest. And as of March 2026, Filler is continuing a dominant run through the European Open Pool Championship in Sarajevo, still climbing, still collecting, still rewriting what young excellence looks like in this sport. His nickname is the Killer, and unlike most nicknames in pool, earned through personality or style, Filler's was earned through results alone. He kills matches, he kills momentum, he kills the hope of opponents who came in believing they had a chance. In 2024, Filler married fellow professional pool player Pia Filler, the first woman ever to compete on the World 9-Ball Tour. Together, they formed the most remarkable couple in the sport's history. 2 world-class professionals who practice together, compete together, and have built something genuinely unprecedented on and off the table. The youngest dynasty in 8-ball pool history isn't finished yet, not even close.
So here we are, the end of the list, but not the end of the story. Because that's the thing about pool dynasties. They don't really end. They transform, they transfer, they get handed from one extraordinary competitor to the next across continents and generations. And every time the sport thinks it's found its permanent king, someone new walks into a room and starts dismantling everything that came before. Think about the journey we just took. We started with Efren Reyes, a man from the Philippines who made the game look like magic and set a standard that nobody has fully matched since. We watched the Philippines produce legend after legend: Bustamante, Archer, Pagulayan, Orcolo, Beato, a factory of greatness that the rest of the world spent decades trying to understand and replicate. We watched Europe answer back, Suke with his machine-like precision, Immonen with his ice-cold heart that kept fighting until the very end, Fayen terminating opponents for 3 decades straight, Shaw breaking world records in his spare time, Ostron collecting world titles across different disciplines with surgical calm, and Filler, the youngest of all, arriving like a thunderstorm and refusing to slow down. We watched America hold its ground, Van Boening building a dynasty on total silence and 500,000 practice balls a year, Woodward turning the Mosconi Cup stage into his personal spotlight, Thorpe grinding away in the background while everyone else grabbed the headlines. We watched Taiwan send 2 brothers to the table and watch them both become world champions. We watched Albania produce a golden eagle who nearly pulled off the impossible. We watched a Russian kid relocate to southern Indiana and promptly complete the greatest single season in professional pool history. Every one of these players answered the same question differently. The question that pool, more than almost any other sport, forces you to answer alone, in silence, under pressure, with the whole world watching. Who are you when everything is on the line? Efren Reyes was a magician. Earl Strickland was a volcano. Dennis Orkoto was a machine built from nothing. Mika Immonen was a fighter who never stopped, right to the very end. And Joshua Filler is something the sport is still figuring out how to contain. The throne of 8-ball pool has never belonged to anyone for long. And right now, in 2026, it's more contested than it has ever been. Gorst and Beato are locked in a rivalry that feels like it's just getting started. Filler is collecting titles like they're going out of style. The Ko brothers are operating at a level that makes Taiwan impossible to ignore. And somewhere out there, the next name on this list hasn't even been written yet. Every generation thought they'd be the last to rule. Every single one was wrong. If this video gave you something, a player you'd never heard of, a story that hit differently, a moment that made you want to go find the match and watch it yourself, then drop it in the comments. Tell us which dynasty hit hardest. Tell us who we missed. Tell us who you think holds the throne right now. And if you want more stories like this, more lore, more dynasties, more deep dives into the sports the world doesn't talk about enough, you know what to do. The table is set, the balls are racked. See you in the next one.